Imagine being alone in a forest, surrounded by enemies. There are no reinforcements, there is no way out. The sound of machine guns tears through the air, and the men beside you fall one by one. Any rational soldier would retreat. Anyone would choose to hide, to wait, to survive. But not this man. In October 1918, in the heart of the Meuse-Argonne offensive, the bloodiest battle in American history, a single soldier did something that even military commanders refused to believe. Alone, without an elaborate strategy, without support, he advanced toward the enemy. And when silence finally took over that forest, 28 German soldiers were dead, and 132 others were marching as prisoners, surrendered to a single man. His name was Alvin York. And what makes this story even more unsettling is not what happened on that battlefield. It is what came before. It is who he was. A man who did not want to fight, a pacifist, a devout Christian who even requested exemption from military service on religious grounds. How did a man who refused to go to war become the greatest individual hero of World War I? This is the story you are about to discover. Alvin York was born on December 13, 1887, in a wooden cabin lost among the mountains of Pall Mall, Tennessee. He was the third of 11 children in a poor family that survived on hunting, fishing, and a small crop. From childhood, Alvin learned to use a rifle not as an instrument of war, but as a tool for survival. It was how the family secured meat for the table during the harsh winters of the Appalachian Mountains. Shooting was as natural to him as breathing. Life in Pall Mall was simple and harsh. Alvin's father died when he was still a teenager, and the responsibility of supporting the family fell on his shoulders. He worked on roads, in the fields, did whatever was necessary. But for years, Alvin also lived a troubled life. He drank, got into bar fights, and gambled on horse races. He was known in the region both for the accuracy of his aim and the violence of his temper. Everything changed in 1914. After the death of a close friend in a bar fight, Alvin York joined the Christian and Missionary Alliance, a deeply pacifist denomination. The transformation was radical. He abandoned alcohol, fights, and gambling. He found in faith a purpose he had never felt before. Alvin came to genuinely believe that killing was wrong, regardless of the circumstances. He was a new man, and that man wanted nothing to do with war. When the United States entered World War I in 1917, Alvin York was drafted. He did not run, he did not hide, but he formally requested exemption from military service based on his religious convictions. The request was denied. The American government needed soldiers, and Alvin's excellence with a rifle was widely known. He was classified as fit for combat and sent to a training camp. The pacifist would be turned into a soldier. Alvin York's internal conflict during training was real and profound. He spoke at length with his commanding officer, Major Edward Buxton, about faith, war, and duty. Buxton did not ridicule him. On the contrary, he respected him. He spent hours with York discussing biblical passages about just war, about defending the innocent, about the moral duty to protect the weak. Alvin York went home, thought deeply, prayed for weeks, and returned with a decision. He would fight, not for glory, not for his country, but because he believed that God had shown him it was right. The Meuse-Argonne offensive began on September 26, 1918, and was the most ambitious and most devastating military operation ever conducted by the United States. More than 1 million American soldiers were launched against German lines across a 40-kilometer front in northeastern France. The objective was to break through the Hindenburg Line, the most sophisticated defensive system ever built in the history of modern warfare, and force the capitulation of the German Empire. The terrain was a nightmare. Dense forests, valleys covered in fog, hills that served as natural defensive positions for the Germans. Every meter gained cost blood. German machine guns swept the slopes with lethal precision, and American soldiers died in droves before they could even see the enemy. In 47 days of combat, the United States suffered more than 26,000 dead and 95,000 wounded. the highest numbers of any American operation in the entire history of wars. It was in this context of absolute horror that Sergeant York and his unit, the 328th Infantry Regiment, 82nd Division, received the mission to capture the crest of a hill dominated by a line of German machine guns in the Argonne Forest. It was October 8, 1918. The morning fog still covered the valley as they advanced in formation, attempting to flank enemy positions before the Germans could detect the maneuver. The mission began to collapse almost immediately. As they moved around the flank, the group of 17 soldiers, led by Corporal Murray Savage, stumbled upon a German headquarters hidden in the forest. The Germans, caught by surprise, raised their hands. There were dozens of prisoners. But then, something catastrophic happened. The machine guns at the top of the hill, now alerted by the movement, opened fire on the Americans. In seconds, 6 American soldiers were dead, including Savage, and 3 others were severely wounded. Suddenly, Corporal Alvin York was the highest-ranking soldier still standing. Around him were the bodies of his comrades, panicked German prisoners, and machine guns firing from above. The group was trapped between prisoners they could not release and shooters they could not see. Anyone else would have waited, retreated, or simply surrendered. York did the only thing his instinct as a hunter from the mountains of Tennessee told him to do. He began to shoot. Alvin York was alone, facing approximately 30 German machine guns positioned along the hillside. His surviving companions were guarding the prisoners behind him. He was the only available shooter. Using a technique he had learned in the forests of Tennessee, never shoot the front animal of a group because the others will flee, always start from the back. York began eliminating the German gunners one by one, from back to front, methodically and relentlessly. His aim was supernatural. With the Springfield M1917 rifle, York fired, moved to a new position before the Germans could locate him, and fired again. The German soldiers could not find him. Each time they tried to identify his position and counterattack, York was already somewhere else, aiming at another target. In a matter of minutes, he had neutralized an uncertain number of machine guns and left a trail of casualties that prevented any German advance. Then came the most cinematic moment of the entire battle, and the most documented. A German lieutenant named Paul Vollmer, desperate to make York stop, led a bayonet charge with 6 soldiers directly toward him. York put away the rifle, drew his Colt .45 pistol, and again using the hunter's technique, eliminating those in the back first so the others would not realize, he shot all 6 before they came within 10 meters of him. Vollmer, in shock, shouted in English, "Stop! I surrender! I will make them all surrender!" York accepted the surrender. With Vollmer as a human shield in front of him, he began walking toward the German positions, ordering the surrender of every machine gun nest he encountered. The Germans obeyed. There was something in the calm and absolute presence of that man, in the certainty with which he moved, without haste, without panic, as if he were simply hunting in the forests of Tennessee, that made any resistance unthinkable. One by one, German soldiers dropped their weapons. When Alvin York reached the American command post that afternoon, he was leading a column of 132 German prisoners, guarded by only 8 surviving American soldiers. General George Duncan, upon receiving the report, said to York a phrase that would become historic. "What you did is the greatest feat performed by any soldier in all the armies of Europe." York replied with his usual simplicity, "It wasn't just me. God was with me." The news of Alvin York's feat spread across Europe and the United States with surprising speed for the standards of 1918. American newspapers desperately needed a story of individual heroism amid the industrial horror of trench warfare. York was perfect, simple, humble, religious, from the deep interior of America. A narrative that the American public could embrace without hesitation. He was promoted to sergeant and awarded the highest American military honor, the Congressional Medal of Honor. France awarded him the Croix de Guerre, England the Military Medal. When he returned to the United States in May 1919, He was received like a god. New York stopped to honor him. The entire country wanted to meet him. Businessmen offered fortunes for his image rights, for advertising contracts, for lectures. A consortium of companies offered the former Tennessee farmer an amount equivalent to millions of dollars today just to lend his name and image to their products. York refused everything. Every offer, every contract, every proposal for enrichment. He refused. He said he had not fought for money, that he had not killed for fame, and that he would not profit from the death of other men. He returned to Pall Mall, to the mountains of Tennessee, to his mother, to Gracie Williams, the young woman he had been dating before the war and whom he married shortly after returning. He chose the simple life he had always known over the celebrity the world offered him. But Alvin York was not indifferent to the world. He knew that the region where he grew up was deeply poor, and that the children of the Tennessee mountains had no access to education. Using his fame as a tool, the only tool he agreed to use, he spent years raising money to build schools. He founded the York Agricultural and Normal Institute, a school that provided free education to poor children in the region. He worked on this for decades, without stopping, without receiving a salary, without using a single cent for himself. The contradiction of Alvin York is what makes him truly extraordinary. He was a pacifist who fought, a humble man who became a legend, a poor man who refused wealth, a warrior who dedicated his life to education. There is no single simple narrative that can fully explain him, and perhaps that is why his story still resonates so powerfully more than 100 years later. Above all, he was a man who acted according to what he believed, without calculating what he would gain from it. In 1941, director Howard Hawks released the film Sergeant York, starring Gary Cooper as Alvin York. The motion picture was the highest-grossing film of that year in the United States and earned Cooper the Academy Award for Best Actor. York had resisted for years the requests from Hollywood to make the film. He agreed only after receiving the guarantee that Cooper would play the lead role and that the profits would be used to fund his schools. Once again, he used fame not for himself, but as leverage for something greater. World War II brought York back into the spotlight. Over 50 years old, he volunteered to enlist as soon as he learned of the attack on Pearl Harbor. The Army politely declined. His contribution would be greater as a symbol than as a soldier. York traveled across the United States on tours to sell war bonds, spoke to recruits, visited military hospitals. Each of his appearances boosted troop morale in a way that no political speech could replicate. The final years of his life were marked by financial difficulties. The schools he had built required constant maintenance, and York continued to donate what he had. He suffered a stroke in 1954 that left him partially incapacitated, and he lived his final years in a fragile state of health, but he never publicly complained about his situation. When the government of Tennessee finally stepped in to help with his medical expenses, York expressed gratitude with the same quiet dignity he had shown throughout his life. Alvin York died on September 2, 1964, at the age of 76, in Nashville. He was buried with full military honors at Wolf River Cemetery in Pall Mall, the same village where he had been born in a wooden cabin 76 years earlier. Hundreds of people attended the funeral, but the place was small and simple, exactly as he would have wanted. There were no grand monuments, no long political speeches. There were only the mountains of Tennessee, the same horizon he had looked at his entire life. What Alvin York leaves behind is not just a story of bravery in combat. It is a question that each of us must answer on our own. What do we do with the gifts we have? York could have used his name to accumulate wealth. He could have settled for glory. Instead, he chose to build something that lasted longer than he did. Schools, communities, possible dreams for children who would never hear about Muse Argonne. The war made him famous, but what he did with that fame is what made him truly great.